So I'm an agile coach. My name on Twitter is Native Wired. And if you follow me, you'll know that I tweet a lot. I am also a unicorn, of course, because we need more unicorns. I'm actually one of the few certified unicorns, and I think I am the only certified unicorn certifier. I'm endorsed on LinkedIn for that. As I said, I'm an agile coach, and that's what we run around doing all the time. We go around hugging trees, and I speak at conferences. So I couldn't kind of help using that picture as an agile coach, because I think that's what a lot of people kind of think when we focus on the human side. I kind of changed from thinking, ooh, it's all about processes. As long as we have the right processes, everything will be fine. And now I find that most of what I work with is actually people. I'm also a big hugger, and I even have it on my business card. And I'm a member of Inclusive Collaboration, which is an organization that tries to make workplaces that is for everyone, that's more inclusive. Also including neurodiversity, for instance. Some people don't like high sounds. Some people are autistic, some have ADHD. We have a lot of different in the spectrum of neurodiversity, but also just introverts and extroverts. How do we create workplaces? Because not only to be kind, which is part of it, but also because we can benefit of being different. So far, we succeeded in, I think, 8 conferences now have, of the big conferences now have quiet rooms or Zen rooms. Because often, if you go to a conference, you need just a little bit of space in your head, and you can go into these rooms. So what I'm going to tell you today is a story. I'm just going to tell a little bit pondering, and then I'm basically going to tell you a story about what happened when I was working with helping people to change. And then I have some sort of conclusion. I will try to provide some tools, but it might not be the tools that you think you need for change. So just before I did this talk the first time, this tweet came up. It's like, we have these managers, and they go like, now we have this plan, and everything is just going to happen. And that's kind of the big problem, is this. And then the magic happens. We have this beautiful plan, and then, ta-da, everything is just fine and dandy. And we do try to do these things. We put up a vision. We put up a plan. We try to explain the why to everyone. And then when we've done the why once, everyone knows why we're doing this, and then we do some trainings. And we sort of get something. But a lot of the times when we introduce these changes, what we do is we actually introduce the mechanics of everything. We may have the processes in place, but we don't know how to follow them properly. It doesn't help to put a team together and go like, now you are a gel team and you're going to collaborate. It doesn't happen that way. And I think that one of the reasons is that the people we work with are these people. The people we are these people. We are engineers, we're computer scientists, we're mathematicians. We go to universities and colleges and all this stuff, and what do we learn? We learn how to code, we learn that there is one answer you can put, at least in Denmark you put 2 lines under it. That's what we learn. That's what we're supposed to do when we get out there. Which is nice, because we need that. Does it compile? Is it a yes or a no? It's often very binary. And then we send people out into the industry, and we expect them to collaborate. A lot of universities, for instance, have very kind of elite systems where you kind of work on your own for 5 years, and then you come out and you're supposed to be able to collaborate. Even the university I come from in Denmark, where we work in teams and 2/3 of the semester is one big project, nobody teaches you how to collaborate. There's a little bit in when I was studying, it was the 6th semester in computer science, where you learn about processes. And by the way, there's something called agile. Well, it wasn't when I studied. It wasn't named yet. And that's about it. And then you're supposed to be able to collaborate. We expect people to be able to communicate. I did learn to communicate at university. I learned how to make university reports. I learned how to make scientific articles and present at scientific conferences. And I never used that since. I do use the fact that I've known how to, at least do a bit of presentation, but most of what I learned when it comes to communication at university, I never used. I never learned how to communicate with people I'm sitting next to. I never learned how to communicate with people who don't have the same education as me, who don't have the same language as me. And now, as I move on, I even have to communicate with people who literally don't have the same language as me. Like right now I'm speaking English to you, and there's like maybe 3 people in this room who have English as their native language. Well, 4. Just forgot you, Emily. The rest of us is speaking or listening in a language that's not our own. We also expect people to know how to give and receive feedback. But this is something we also don't learn. We learn how to get grades in school, and that's about it. We don't learn how to give them properly. We don't learn how to receive this. And we kind of expect people, at least in Agile, to be this generalizing specialist. We have this one team that can do everything, and this team is cross-functional, and it's just perfect. And we want people to be specialists because we want them to be good at what they do, but we also want them to be able to step out of their comfort zone and work in areas where it's needed. And again, this is something that we have not learned. I never learned at university how to go out and do stuff I wasn't very good at. I learned how to specialize in the stuff I was good at. And we have a long list of things that we expect. And often when we come into companies, this is just expected of people. Because, these are normal human skills, soft skills, anyone can do that. I see the same in the technical area, by the way, where we often go like, oh yeah, we have these people, they've been to university for 5 years, so they know how to program. Well, they know how to program small stuff. They've never seen legacy code before. There's all these things that we don't know. So, see, in my slides twice. I heard a talk by Torbjørn where he said, things become so much better when we accept them as they are, not as we want them to be. And I think this is kind of what my story is mostly about. We have to figure out where we are. We have to accept things as they are. And then we can work towards getting them where we want them to be. And interesting enough, this is not new. Like Mike Cohen did this ADAPT model in 2010 where he said, first we need awareness of something that is interesting. Then we need people to desire to do this. And then we need to give them ability to do this. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean you know how. So, once upon a time, I was working in this Swedish music streaming company, where there was a lot of autonomy. And the problem was, a lot of the ways people perceive autonomy is do whatever. We are autonomous, we can do whatever we want. Well, actually, that's not what autonomy is. I usually call it recklessness or something like that. Autonomy is you self-govern within a frame. But that also means that someone needs to set this frame. Often when I come into companies as well, they talk about, oh, we need people to do Scrum. Or we want them to be agile, and then they decide, oh, we don't want to do Scrum. And the management goes like, yeah, we really want them to do Scrum, but they're autonomous, so we can't tell them what to do. And that's a total misunderstanding. The job of management nowadays is not to tell people exactly what to do. The job of management is to set a frame so that we can grow and do the best we can within this frame. And the problem is also that autonomy is not all we need. We need a lot more to be able to be motivated and perform the best we can. So Daniel Pink has a book called Drive. He also has a 15-minute video that's very accessible. By the way, there's links to stuff in my slides. He says we need autonomy. We need to be able to take control of our work within some frames. We need mastery. We need to feel like we're good at what we do, and we need to be able to get better and better. And we need purpose. For some people, purpose can be, yes, I go to work and I get some money so that I can eat. But most people need more purpose than that. Most people need to know, what am I contributing to? I know very few people who think, okay, I can just code in a corner and that's fine and that's my purpose. Most people I know want to be like, oh, I am creating this awesome product. I am helping these people. We kind of decide where we want to work, and we want to be something that contributes to something. It can be that it's a really, really awesome technical solution and we just want to dive in and we want to be the best at this. But we do need that purpose, and if we don't have that, we don't know where to go. So I was in a tribe where we had a product lead and a tech lead, And it was a fairly new tribe. And what they had decided to do, or it kind of became a little bit gradually, was to invite the agile coaches into the leadership. So instead of just having agile coaches working with the teams, we were part of the leadership. It didn't mean that we made decisions, but it did mean that we were involved and we were kind of guiding them along with some of the stuff. Because as they said, we are the experts on tech and product. You are the experts on change and the experts on people. Yeah. Sorry. So we went on an offsite in Falkenberg, so not that far from here. And what we wanted to have was we wanted the tribe to have clear expectations so that they knew exactly what was expected of them. We wanted to set a direction so that they had their purpose. So that's about setting the frame and giving the purpose. And we wanted them to be involved in this and discuss this. Because one thing is setting up a purpose and a frame, but if people don't feel involved, they're not going to own it. They need to own these things to actually do something about it. So what we did was, we did an exercise on expectation management. We used the format of user stories. As a chapter lead, I expect a tribe lead to do something, so that's something. So each group of people would be writing these expectations, and then the groups would be talking to each other like, I expect this of you. Is this something you want to live up to? And if they said yes, we wrote that down. And if they said no, we were like, okay, so what's the struggle with this? And sometimes we would take things and change it a little bit. We also wanted to present the vision. But we didn't only want to present the vision, we wanted people to start owning the vision. So to actually achieve this vision, we had aspirations. Because what happens often with visions is you put really pretty words on a wall, and then the magic happens. We become this beautiful company that follows all these visions. So we wanted to have aspirations, and the way we built it up was like this. We have a nice vision. We have our mission, what is our purpose here? And then we decided to create different pillars. And within each of these pillars, we had 5 aspirations. So the pillars that we decided to focus on was people, technology, delivery, and product. And what we did was we created an open space-ish, because people couldn't suggest stuff. But for each of the aspirations, we created a station. So that first people could go to the 5 stations and they could discuss people. Then they could discuss text in the next round, then could discuss delivery, and then they could talk about product. So the reason for this was that the leadership kind of made the aspirations and made it clear that these are our aspirations. The leadership owns the aspirations. But we want you to look at these aspirations and saying, this is something I can actually agree on. This is a place I also want to aspire to be. So we wanted to involve people. So what we did was, I will go through the people one now. The first thing that we had as an aspiration was, we want to have a psychologically safe environment. And this was something that's been around for many, many years. 65 was the time that the term was used first time. But it's becoming more and more relevant. It's coming up more and more. In 1990, 1999, some professors started making surveys about this. They started looking into why is psychological safety important. Why do we need this? Amy Edmondson, who did it in 1999, took it very much from a management perspective. She was looking at why do we get so many medical errors and which departments has the more medical errors. And what she found out was, when she looked at it the first time, she's like, it looks like the best departments have the most medical errors. And she realized there's something strange here, so she started looking more into it. It turned out that that's not how it was. But the departments that were working the best were admitting their medical errors because they were not afraid to be punished. And we kind of want an environment where we're not afraid to be punished, where we can make mistakes. Because mistakes can be what leads us to the next big thing. If we're afraid to make mistakes, we're going to take the safe way all the time. Not safe with big letters and stuff, but small safe. We also wanted to be an example for inclusion and diversity. We often hear this, oh, we want more inclusion. And sadly, too often, it's only about women. We want more women, which is really hard to get in. But there's other things. And one thing is inviting people in. and saying we are now very diverse. But another part of it is how do we include people? Because if we just invite people in and expect them to act like we do, then we're not being inclusive. We might be diverse, but it's not going to help us. And the thing we want to get out of these things is that people are different, because that is really good for us. So we wanted to kind of invite people to dance as well. Just have to look because I can't remember the order. We wanted to have squads, so small teams that had missions, and they were expected to own their problems. We also wanted to have a growth mindset. And this is actually interesting because this was not challenged. And a year after, we found out that at least 50% of the developers did not know what a growth mindset is. They just didn't feel comfortable at that point to challenge it. So a growth mindset is about that fact that you can keep growing. Fixed mindset says you have like a certain amount of intelligence, for instance, and you can't go beyond that. But a growth mindset says we can always learn, we can always expand, we can always grow. And we wanted to have this mindset, and we wanted to have it by having feedback. Because how are we going to know how we're performing if nobody tells us? And the last one that we have was about respect. So what we did was people went around in these 5 ones, and they were looking at them and discussing them. And we gave them these voting dots. So for each pillar, they had a green dot. What is the single most important aspiration within each pillar? Within technology, within delivery, within product, within people. And they had one red that said, I don't agree on this. They didn't have to use that one. We only got 2 red dots. One was actually on the squads, because one of the developers thought it was not ambitious enough. That we want to work as a tribe. We want to be a full department working together and not just squads owning things. We decided to not change that one because we felt like we were not ready for it. We still have been doing things to actually implement this, but it wasn't something we were ready for. And the other one was that we said, we want a 0 bug policy, which is nice to have if you have the time for it. So we changed that into having that we want high quality and we want to catch things as early as possible. But what we saw when we had this people thing was that 38 out of 43 voted for psychological safety as the most important thing. So we decided to do something about it. And the way we did this was we have quarterly planning, and in each quarter we would do something practical to achieve one of these aspirations or more of these aspirations. Way too often we just, again, like the vision, we put it up on a wall and say, this is who we aspire to be. But people can't just do things on their own. They can't magically just know how to give feedback. Most people don't even know what psychological safety even means. At least it's like, yeah, it's something about being safe and it's not physical, but a lot of people, for instance, think it's about being comfortable at work. And hopefully most of the time we are comfortable at work. But if you're always comfortable, then you are not taking the conflicts that arise. You are not the one challenging each other. So if you're always comfortable, you're probably not safe in one way or another. And that's a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have. So what we decided to do was to start working on this quarter for quarter for quarter and trying to achieve things. So one of the things we did in tech, for instance, was we decided to take people in from the industry and have them pair with people. Because one of the good ways of learning when you want to learn about technical stuff is actually pairing with people who know it. So Kevin, who's speaking later today, have been in several times and working with the teams, both in Göteborg and in Stockholm. We had JB Reinsberger in as well. So bringing people in who can actually, who knows about the code. I mean, I can tell them, you have to do TDD, you have to do continuous deployment, you have to do continuous integration. And I did it 16 years ago. But I can't sit down with them and show them how to do it. And with some of these things, it actually makes sense to have that kind of mastery where you have someone who goes into your own code and looks at it. For the psychological safety, we started out with a survey. So Google has made this experiment, this survey, where they went in and checked all their companies I'm going to rewind. went in and checked all their teams to figure out what does it take to have a high-performing team. And what they found out was it was the psychological safety. And they made this survey. So what we did was we sent out this survey into the tribe to figure out how are we actually doing. Because we had a feeling we were doing okay. And we were for most parts. But we still had 11% who said, I think there's someone in my squad who would deliberately undermine me when I speak up. And that was a big shock, that we actually had people like that in a tribe where we felt everyone was fine. Then what we did was we created awareness. So we actually divided people up into groups of 7 to 10 with people they were not usually working with, more or less. When you have 50 people, it can be hard. And then we talked about awareness. What is psychological safety? We showed them the definition, but we also had people talk about what does it mean to us? Because again, it's a little bit the same as a vision. It's nice to have something on the wall, but what does it actually mean to us? So if you look at the definitions, it's about being without fear, when you make mistakes, or speaking up. But what does that mean? And one of the things we realized was that code reviews and pull requests was an area where people felt very uncomfortable. And mostly it wasn't receiving the feedback. It was how do I tell someone that there's something wrong with their code without attacking them? They didn't know how. They tried, but when you don't know how, you can do the best you can, and maybe you're lucky that you're natural at giving feedback. And also, how do you achieve feedback? And like some of the people were very aware that every time somebody criticized me, I get really angry. So how do we do that? So what we did in the next quarter was, first of all, we did an action workshop where we actually deliberately went into each squad and said to them, okay, this is like a retrospective. We're going to look at psychological safety in your team. And we're going to look at how are you doing on this? Are there any areas where it hurts? Are there any areas where you're doing really well? And just like a retrospective, you can either do more of what's working well, you can try to change what's not working, or you can make experiments. And we got some really, really interesting experiments. One of them was, for instance, the fuck-up of the week. So every Friday they have fuck-up of the week. Because as they say, often when we talk about celebrating failures, we take the stuff that turn into success later. We talk about post-it notes, for instance. Post-it notes was supposed to be really, really strong glue. And it didn't really work. But then they looked at, how can we use this? And I mean, if you look at the amount of post-it notes that just any agile coach has in their bag at the moment, that was a really, really good idea. So they took that learning and went it into something really awesome. But every single day, we make a lot of mistakes that doesn't turn into something really, really awesome. And if you think you're not making mistakes, I think you should remove the backspace of your computer. We make mistakes all the time. So they decided that we want to be more comfortable about making mistakes. So we're actually going to tell our worst mistake every Friday. Other people decided that they wanted to take a round and ask every single one in the team because they had 2 people who were extrovert and 5 people who were introvert. Plus the 2 people who were extrovert also had a strong opinion about things, which meant that they were the ones being heard. And they were kind of aware of this, but once they were in this situation, they kind of forgot about it. That's one of the problems, is you think differently, and when you're in it, you go like, this is so interesting, and we just talk about rural, and then we kind of forget, there's these other people. So they decided to kind of make their own process, where every time they had to make an important decision, they would actually ask each person, and it would be okay to say, I don't have anything to add, but they would encourage everyone to speak up. So each of them found different things that they could do. We also did this with the leadership team, which meant all the chapter leads / engineering managers, all the product owners and the leadership. Because one of the big things about stuff like psychological safety is you need role models. If you are trying to make a team safe and your manager is not, it doesn't help very much. It's a little bit like kids. When you tell them, you can't do these things, and then you go out and do it. I mean, I've tried, I'm not a mom, but I'm an aunt, and I have a few times where I heard my cute little niece say really bad curse words that I know came from me. And my sister tries to make me not curse, and I try not to, but they are just so good at picking up. And it's the same with all other things. We learn from what we see. We learn from role models. And we are all kind of role models because we all lead by example. So we did the same. We did the awareness, and we also did the actions with the leadership team. And then we decided to create a feedback workshop, where we went in directly into each team and worked with them on feedback. Because often what happens if companies do have feedback, and there was training available, is you go into a big setting, and maybe you are 40 people in a training room, or maybe you're 20 people. But if you are not very comfortable about speaking up, even 20 people can be a lot. But most people feel comfortable in the team, so talking about feedback in a team and learning it that way can be really effective. So the definition is this is the one from Amy Edmondson. Psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So this was the first one we used, where we also used the TED Talk that she uses. She also has I think, really good article, but it's a scientific article, and I got lost as soon as I was finished reading which methods they used, so I haven't read that one, but the TED Talk is good. And we also used Joshua Krajewski. He has these 6 dimensions about being yourself, about taking risks, about disagreeing, I always forget someone, ask questions, and raising problems. These are things that are essential in a company. These are things that are essential in a team. Actually, these are also things that are essential when you have a family. But if you want to be able to do good stuff, these are things that you need to work on. So we were using these dimensions because just talking about psychological safety becomes a little bit too fluffy thing. What do? Do we all hold hands and sing songs? I don't know how many developers do that. A few, and that's fine. But most people I've suggested that to get really, really strange in their face. I did try it with one team when I was working in Denmark, where I actually asked them to go in a circle and I served them herbal tea, because that's how we say it in Denmark. Oh, we're going to be in a circle and drink herbal tea. And they were like, oh, this is way too soft. But they actually stood in a circle, and then when I gave them herbal tea, they started laughing because they were like, okay, this is ridiculous. But sometimes we tend to think that these soft things are like that. And when you frame them into more specific categories that you can relate to in your daily life, then you can start working with them. So we started seeing results. But the interesting part about this is you see the results really, really late. Some of the results we see a year later. We expected that, once we work with psychological safety, everyone will be fine with working with other people in the tribe. But it took more than a year before we reached that point. Let's see if I can remember who it was. Hofstadter? Yeah, Hofstadter's law. It always takes longer than you think, even when you take Hofstadter's law into consideration. Which doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to do these things. We just need to be aware that it takes a long time and you have to keep doing it. That's also the interesting thing about these things. It kind of gets a little bit rusty. So you have to keep reminding people this is the way we work. And if something happens, you need to act on it. But what we saw was all of a sudden people started speaking up. There's show and tell every month, which is a sort of a demo to the tribe. And all of a sudden we saw different people now presenting at these demos. And some of them are really bad at it. But that was okay. Like we have some people who are really, really eager to show what they do. They're not very good at presenting yet. Some of them even said, you know what, I would like to take a training in presentation technique. But we see more and more people speaking up. We see people going up to the tribe leads, to the tech lead and the product lead, asking questions. Something that was encouraged for more than a year before it started happening. And I find this really interesting because I think this is the organization I've been in that has had the lowest hierarchy. So even though you have the hierarchy, they're not very far apart. And still, you kind of have this is my manager. And even if you have someone that's 2 levels up. So it does make a difference, and it takes a lot of work. People started seeking help, also outside their squads. So before we started working on this, what we saw was that people would seek help outside their squad if they worked together with someone before. That's kind of how it works. There's all these official things, but what really works is, yeah, I'm just going to call John because I was with him in that other team. What we saw was all of a sudden, people started asking other squads, team members that they didn't even know the name of, to go in and see if they could help them. We saw some interesting sessions. There is this exercise called what's not to like about this code. Sorry, I better say it properly. Where you have a screen, you put up the code, and everyone kind of criticizes the code. There is a description on how to do it, how to facilitate it, so it becomes feedback and not just blaming. But it's a really, really good exercise for people to go in and learn about how do we actually code in our team. How can we get a common coding standard, or at least something so we can recognize each other's code? Because if we work together as a team, we also want to be able to go in and help each other, or to go in and maybe fix something in code we didn't do. The likelihood of it only being ourselves going in and fixing code that we wrote is not very big, except if you have like a one-person company. And besides that, even if you look at code you wrote 6 months ago, you go like, who wrote this? What were they thinking? So actually getting to have some good standards was a good thing. And it also made them try mob programming a few times, where you have one screen, one computer, and the whole team sits and works with that. What we also achieved was, what we decided to do as leadership team was, what is the most important thing we can do as a team? Well, point one, we have to be the role models. But point two was, we need to speak up. We are the ones who kind of set the stage for this, so we need to be the ones who speak up. So we created this poster that is now put up in every squad. We just moved to a different location, and I was really happy to see that this was one of the things that was put up the very first day in 2 out of 5 squads. The first we did was we tried to describe every single situation. We tried to describe, okay, it's okay to ask questions when you start, but it's also okay to ask questions when you've been here for a long time, and you may feel like I shouldn't ask this question because I've been here for a long time and I should probably know this. But the problem is, if you try to take every situation into account, first of all, there's going to be like 20 pages of text just for making mistakes. Nobody's ever going to read that. And there will be half of it that we lost. So we kind of decided to show respect, assume good intent, listen without judgment, care for each other, and be kind. Those are like the basics. And the assuming good intent is really important because we are going to make mistakes. One of the developers asked, does that mean we can never, ever make jokes? Because the problem with jokes is you can really hurt people with jokes. And saying to them, this was just a joke, is not going to take away that pain. But we also wanted to be a workplace where we could have fun. But what we said was, if you make a joke that hurts someone, we want to have an environment where that person can tell you, and where you can react on it, and where it's okay that you made this mistake. And sometimes you can make the same mistake over and over again. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but I have the pronouns on my page because I know a lot of trans people. And they find it's a problem that they are always asked for their pronouns. And as a person who's not a trans, I put up my pronouns to normalize this. I have a friend that I met as a woman and is now non-binary, and I really struggle with they. And I keep making that mistake. But I try. And they know that I try, and that's the important thing, because they assume good intent. They could get really angry at me every time. And we can do that, but a lot of mistakes that we make is something that we learned over 40, 50 years. Some of the stuff that we feel like, I shouldn't be doing this, is something we learned in kindergarten. A lot of the stuff that's going on about, women in IT, I mean, my nephew came one day and says, isn't it really weird? There was this girl and she was dressed up as a knight. And what he meant was like, it's a boy's dress-up clothes. And my response was like, isn't that just awesome? You can dress up like anything you want. But he was also the one who asked me, glitter is a boy's color, right? Well, I had to tell him, no, glitter is for both boys and girls. But he doesn't do that anymore. He did that when he was 5. But now he knows that glitter is definitely not for boys. So a lot of the things that we have, we've done this for 30 years, and it's going to take time to change that. And that's why we need to assume good intent. But it also means that we need to listen when somebody comes up to us and says there's a problem. So we work with other stuff. This is a quote from Twitter, but I never managed to find the tweet again. But once you've told your vision so many times you want to puke, that's when people start listening. The thing is, you sit and you work with your vision. And first you figure out, okay, where do we want to go? And then there's the wordsmithing, and you want it to look nice and pretty and something. And maybe you work with this for 6 months in intense meetings. And you go up into a department meeting, you go like, woohoo, look at our new vision. And then maybe you tell it again next week. And they're like, okay, now they got it. I mean, it's on the wall, everyone knows it. But you need to repeat these things again and again and again. You need to bring them up all the time so that people are reminded, this is where we want to go. Because we forget. We get too caught up in our daily lives and we forget. We need to actively take a step back and have that helicopter perspective. The please come to us if there's any problems, again, was something that was repeated over and over again. We started celebrating nationalities. What we found out in the spring was that out of 50 people, we had 17 nationalities. And we wanted to celebrate that. So we made exercises for people. We asked everyone to tell us how to say good morning, thank you, and hello in their language. We even had a Gitte one. So I can now say good morning in Göteborg. God morgon, god morgon, god morgon. At least that's how I was told it was. So we did this, and then people got this piece of paper with all the nationalities, and they had to try and figure out how to pronounce this. The interesting part is that we have one from Pakistan, one from China. These are the easy ones to find. But the rest is like, how do you tell if someone is from Poland or Albania or Germany? You have all these nationalities, so they actually had to talk to each other. And talk to each other about something that was not work. And that's actually another part of creating psychological safety, is have people talk to each other about stuff that's not work. Because all of a sudden, we become humans. We are still not very good at the languages. I can only say it in one more language than I could when I started. But we had a lot of fun with it. And it also became a safe way for people to be in the center, because you're just talking about yourself and how to speak in your language. We did a lot of stuff also for tech, product, and delivery. Like, for instance, creating a proper product roadmap. Where do we actually want to go? How do we want to get there? What do we want to do about our tech? So inviting in JB and Kevlin was one of the part of, this is something we want to do with our tech. We want to have a higher quality. Creating a steering group that actually looks at across all the squads to figure out, what do we do with our architecture? And the thing I think that really worked for this was we actively took out time each quarter to do these things. And we put them up as sort of OKRs at the level of the other things that were there. It wasn't just something that we, by the way, do, which these soft things tend to be. It tends to be something like, oh, by the way, we also need to fulfill all these things. But that's just something we do. We actively pulled them up on tribe level and said, these are the things we want to strive for in this quarter. I think that makes sense. So we learned some stuff. We learned that the tools we need are not necessarily what we thought we needed. It's not about giving people the right programs. It's not necessarily about giving people training. It's much more subtle tools. And one of the tools is repetition. Repeat things over and over and over again. It's about caring. And this seems like a strange thing when we talk about in IT. We talk about a lot of IT developers, but actually caring matters. If you don't care about what you do, if you don't care about the people you work with, it's really hard to create psychological safety. Why would you create psychological safety from a person if you don't care about them? You have to enable people. If you find out that people are not able to do this, you have to enable them to do it. You have to figure out if there's some training that they need, if there's some coaching that they need, but you need to give them these tools, because it's not just going to happen by telling them you have to change. You have to enable them. And of course you need to repeat this. Communication is really essential. I did a training yesterday, I think someone said it's like 80% of all problems is communication, or something like that. So much of what we do is communication, people-to-people communication. It's a lot easier with computers because they kind of want it in a specific format. And even though it's hard to program, we have compilers helping us and stuff like that. The problem with people is we don't hear the same things. Even if I say something to someone and I think, okay, I've been really clear. First of all, I'm not speaking my native tongue. Second of all, that person might not hear what I'm saying. One of the tools I use very much when I coach is actually project management tools, like having deadlines when we have actions. And when I would ask people, so what is your deadline for this? What they heard me say was, I want you to finish this as fast as possible and give me a deadline right now. What I was actually saying was, I want to make sure you have the time to do this, so I want you to have a realistic deadline, and if you don't have the time to do this, I would like you to tell me. So communication is really, really hard, and that's something you need to work on as well. You need to involve people. Just having things up on a wall is not going to help people. Just telling them this is how we want to do it is not going to help, because people don't own it. They will sit in the meeting and they will nod, and then it will disappear. And if people don't own stuff, they're not going to do it. Then you need to repeat it. You need to create that safety. Safety is so essential. We're not going to try things out unless we feel safe, that we're not going to be blamed or punished for this. And safety, we sometimes think about this as like big things, or we don't want to break our arm or whatever. But it's also the small things. It's the thing about coming to work and saying, you know what, I had a really shitty night. My child was up all night. I'm going to be grumpy all day. That's also safety. But it means that now everyone else knows why you're grumpy. And maybe it's okay to be grumpy today. Most people who have kids have tried having kids that are up all night. And you go like, yeah, I think they're asleep now. And then 5 minutes later, they go like, no, they're not. Or if they're sick all night. And everyone knows what it's like to come to work the next day. So if you speak about things, personal stuff, you create, and you have that environment, all of a sudden you create more of a safety to be who you are. Some people talk about, does that mean we can be whoever we are? No, we need that respect. If you're a person who likes to yell at people, that's not going to work because we need respect for each other. But it does mean that we can work with that and we can help you maybe address it differently because there's a reason you're yelling. And we learned that storytelling is so important. A lot of the goals that we saw were numbers. So many users, so many blah blah. And most people don't really find this interesting. Of course, there's something interesting in numbers, but it's not really what motivates us. What motivates us is the stories about the people using the products, about the developers building on the stuff that we already built. That is what motivates us. So when you talk about visions, when you talk about safety, you need to tell those stories. Stories is essential to get people to work on these things. And of course, you need to repeat it. And we realized that it takes a lot of time and investment. It takes a lot more time than we expected. We had a goal for Q4 2017 that we wanted people to try working in other teams, embedding in other teams for a week. That was our goal. And not a single one wanted to. We had one team that was very interested in it. They even put up this nice paper where you could kind of pull the name of their team and you could say, oh, I want to work with you. They put it up in all the other teams, nothing happened. And then like 3 weeks ago when we were planning for Q4, all of a sudden we hear 2 of the teams actually decided to swap a member during this quarter. And without us even mentioning it. Because all of a sudden it's okay. People now feel safe to experiment. And they feel like they have the opportunity to go in and try stuff. So the conclusion is, safety is not always comfort. If it's never comfort, you have another problem. But it's not something you mistake for comfort. Comfort is not where we grow. Comfort is not where we learn. And if you make a big mistake, like you take your whole company's product down for a week, that's not going to be comfortable. But it needs to be safe. Because if it's not safe, you're not going to learn from it. Even no matter what you do, no matter how many postmortems you had, you're not going to learn from it if you don't feel safe. Because your brain is just going to block. Basically, when we panic, our whole frontal cortex stops working. We become animals because we want to protect ourselves. And it really helps to actually give people the tools. We were not sure about this. I mean, it was an experiment. Like, is it worth the investment? Yes, it is. It is totally worth it. Because when you go in and you help people, when you go in and give people these tools, they start blossoming. You see people who never spoke up before all of a sudden starting speaking up. You see people trying out things. You hear cursing from one team area because they tried something out and it didn't work. But it now means that they don't have to go down that way anymore. And it was something they were avoiding before and trying to kind of, how do we calculate which is the best way to go? Which can be good sometimes. But sometimes you just have to try stuff and go like, oh shit. Well, at least we know that now. But that also means that you need to have the technical background to do that so you can actually roll back. That was a really good point someone mentioned in my training yesterday, is that also creates safety. If you have that test framework, if you know you can roll back, it's so much easier to make mistakes. So this slide also have all my information, and I'm very happy to connect. And it has all the links. Oh, now it also stopped. Okay. It has all the links to the stuff I've been talking about, how to, what's not to like about this code. I just need to tell my computer not to restart, which is the good thing about having a Mac and not a Windows. So it became a little bit shorter than I thought. I thought I had 45 minutes, so a little bit. I started early, okay, thank you. So, thank you for listening, and I'm open to questions.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Please ask the questions into the microphone, so raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone, just because we want to get them for the video. I know microphones can be a little uncomfortable, so if you're very uncomfortable, you can just ask me or Emily, and we'll ask the question for you.
When you were talking about communication, and that was very important, you were talking about this example when you were talking about deadlines. Did you try to educate people in different types of communication, like active listening, where you repeat what you think you heard the other person said before you continue the discussion?
So we had some of that. When we did during the feedback, we also practiced listening a bit, and with some individuals, we practiced listening. We did talk about should we do a proper communication training, but that was not something we chose to do at that point because it wasn't the most important thing. But it is something I would definitely do. Talk about how do you actually listen to people. One of the things we did was we set up rules when we had meetings or offsites, for instance. Stuff like no computers unless you have someone home who's pregnant or you're on call. Same for phones. Listen to understand, not to respond. Listen without judging. So we would kind of put up these rules, but we didn't do any training with them. But it would definitely be something I would do depending on the team. Because I think that's something that's really important, is we don't really know what listening is. So we did a little bit in the feedback, but not much.
Okay, so a lot of positive things in your conclusions. Anything that you would, any mistake that you did, you would like to have undone, or something you would really do differently?
Well, that's a good question. I try not to remember that, but I think I would have made sure that people were more engaged before we had the first awareness session. What we saw was that people didn't really know how important it was, even though they voted for it. And it could sometimes be hard to drag people into it. And I think that once they realized what it really was about, they got very engaged. But I think I would have framed it differently. For the aspirations, I would have had better discussions with them, maybe longer discussions. Because what we found out like a year after was that people, there was stuff they didn't understand, but they didn't feel comfortable saying it. The problem with the kind of not feeling comfortable saying it is, how do you create safety enough for people to say the stuff they don't feel safe enough saying? And I haven't found a good solution for that. You have to create that environment before people speak up. But I would probably have done it differently than just doing it as an open space, having more discussions.
Yes, you were talking about autonomy at the start of your talk.
Yeah.
And it was brief, but I would just like to ask, would you say that it was a part of this was to refactor the concept of autonomy as individuals, as teams, as tribes in relations to each other in order to be able to establish psychological safety?
I don't think it's a big part of the big part of your psychological safety, but I think it was a big part of having people feel comfortable enough. Well, then it's psychological safety, but feel comfortable enough to try out things. Is actually that they were the ones making the decisions. But the problem with if you interpret autonomy as do whatever you want, it can also feel like, well, nobody cares about what I do. And by setting the expectations and the frames, people start caring about what you do, which in the beginning can feel uncomfortable because all of a sudden you have to, live up to some stuff. But it also means that you will grow and you will learn how to do things. So it was kind of part of the whole package of trying to get more motivation. And I think it was a part of the safety that people, can try out things there on their own, because if you start telling them what to do in their expertise area, they're not going to feel safe. They're going to feel like, okay, they're not good enough. So I do think it had something to do, but not the main purpose.
How important did you find repetition was?
Really important.
Really important.
Yeah, so I really find that repetition is important.
How important do you find repetition was?
I think that repetition is one of the most important things.
Thank you very much for an excellent talk.
Yes.